Welcome to OrthoPod, a podcast about the people of orthopedics and their stories. We understand that we all play many roles in our careers and lives, and it is these very stories that ultimately inform our successes and failures. Hello everyone, welcome to OrthoPod. This is a podcast that is going to share the stories of many interesting people. Today we have just that individual, Dr. Lehana Thabane, a close friend, colleague, and someone I have great respect for. He's currently the professor of Biostatistics and associate chair of the Department of Health Research Methods, Evidence, and Impact at McMaster University. He's an associate member of the Departments of Pediatrics and Anesthesia in the School of Rehabilitation, in the Faculty of Health Sciences here again at McMaster University, and is also the Director of Biostatistics at St. Joseph's Healthcare in Hamilton, Ontario. He has a breadth of experience regarding research from anywhere from clinical trials to pragmatic trials to health research methods, has been a mentor to countless hundreds and hundreds of individuals, has won several mentorship awards, involved in multiple professional societies, and keep in mind, he's also well published, well over 650 papers and at least 200 invited presentations and counting. So it is with great pleasure that I get a chance to introduce you, Dr. Thabane and Lehana. We'll chat today about really what's on your mind. So welcome, and what's on your mind?
Well, that's fantastic, Mo, for a very generous introduction.
Well, I always say when you have this much to offer, our challenge is really how do we get to the stuff that you want to talk about? Because we could talk for hours and hours and hours. But I get the impression there are a few things that are much more important to you than others.
Yeah. Well, it is true. I think, like everybody else, you get up in the morning, you're thinking about how can I make my life worthwhile?
Right.
And there are a few things which are really preoccupying me these days, just to mention a few, one of which is really mentorship, which is support of junior investigators in all their efforts trying to make our world better. And certainly I have dedicated part of my time and continue to do that in improving the practice of pilot studies,
right,
which are really studies we do at the beginning to try and get a sense on, or can we actually go a lot bigger to try and answer some of unresolved questions in our clinical care or in health practice and so on. So I would say these are the two
big things
in my mind at the moment.
So it's quite funny because I was just recently traveling, and I get asked every year to talk about something that's on my mind. And I guess for the last 20 years, the concept of think big or think bigger has been there. And at McMaster, that has been, I've learned that from you among many others. And Gordon has been a big proponent of that, as is PJ Devereaux. Sure. But the thing that I think is really, we talk about a lot, but we don't get a lot of deep depth into it, which is the concept of mentorship and what it means. And the question we get asked a lot in our institution is, how do we develop, how do we succession plan, but how do we mentor the right people to find, quote, their passion, and all these sort of cliched words.
Right. But
from your perspective, let me ask you this. How do you, when you look at defining a mentor or a good mentor, what are the check marks that define a good mentor? Now, I know in some ways you're having to speak a little bit about the things you do. So, I know you're also very humble, but in that context, what's a good mentor? Who's a good mentor?
Well, put it this way. I was born in Lesotho, which is in South Africa.
Right.
And as an African, one of the grounding philosophies that we grew up with, it's Ubuntu.
Okay.
Ubuntu is a word in Africa which is really, in a lot of African cultures, means I am because we are. Essentially what that means is that to whom much is given, much is expected. That's another way of thinking of it.
Right.
Or equality of all for all, or justice for all, as Gandhi would have
absolutely
thought of the same thing. But essentially that's how I think of mentorship. Mentorship is really making a decision that if I have been privileged to be in a situation where I have something that I can use to be able to help somebody else to get to where I am, then I need to be able to use that privilege appropriately.
Can I ask you, if I could, when you say doors are open for you, Malcolm Gladwell talks about this concept of outliers, and my perception of outliers has been genius is extremely rare, very, very rare. However, great successes happen when the right people open the right doors and you have the courage to walk through all those doors. What were the kind of doors that you walked through to get to where you are today? But more importantly, who are those people that influenced you to help us get context to who you are?
It is true. And I mean, I can imagine everyone has a story to tell about their academic journey.
Right.
My academic journey really started in high school, where I had great teachers who planted the seed for me in terms of really the desire to spend my life somehow in education.
Right.
And then you go to university, you have professors who take the time not only to educate you on the technical stuff, but taking the time to plant the seed of wanting to do more to help others.
Right.
So I credit my opportunities to all the people who along the way, not only have they actually provided technical training to me, but took the time to actually say, hey, here are the other things that you could do to become a better person.
Right.
And then I went, I went to England to do my master's, and I had the same opportunities of someone who was not only my PhD supervisor, but a mentor, is Demeter Schoenberg.
Okay.
And then I came to Western, and I had a wonderful mentor for my PhD at University of Western Ontario, Safiul Haq. Did the same thing for me.
Right.
And, it was this kind of opportunities which, fortunately, as I started my academic career, even here in Canada, I had similar opportunities. I came to McMaster, even at the time when Dave Sackett had already left McMaster.
Right. So he had gone at that point to Oxford.
He was at Oxford,
right,
but somehow.
And just for those of you who don't know who David Sackett is, look him up, Google his name. Many would call him one of the forefathers of epidemiology. I started and chaired Canada's first Department of Epidemiology back in 1960s, late 60s.
Absolutely.
And huge, immense impact. So look him up if you don't know that name.
So people like Dave Sackett, Charlie Goldsmith, Andy Willen. And these are the people who really, George Wells and many other colleagues who really took me under their wing and always provided more opportunities. I mean, I remember having a discussion with Dave Sackett, which really, for me, continued to resonate even today. He said, I asked him, I said, Dave, when you came to McMaster as a 32-year-old, did you know that you would create such a phenomenon of evidence-based, practice in this country, around the world? He says, no, actually, I was terrified. However, he said, I behaved as though I knew what I was doing. And he framed it.
That's all of us. Anyways,
in one of the talks, I say, you can always behave yourself to a successful outcome.
Right.
And, your original question was, what is really the checklist for what makes the best mentor?
Right.
And it was through the discussion with all these people that I came to a single item that makes the best mentor: someone who makes the decision to become a mentor.
Fascinating.
I often find that it all boils down to that single criterion.
Right. I think, and I'll use this, and these, are very crude, statistics, but if you were to talk to 100 people, and let's say in orthopedics for me, and they call themselves mentors, right off the bat, 50% of them are probably not, but they've been given this perception that, well, I know because I'm in an institution where I have students, therefore I am a mentor. If they take the remaining 50 people, of which they're doing more, even then there's another 50% that really probably aren't embodying what you've said is, it is my calling, it is a passion, and I get a great joy. In my lifetime, I don't think I could probably count on a handful of people that I've seen embody that. And you're certainly one of those individuals. So it's particularly interesting to see that it is a calling in a way. When did you have a sense that this was one of your, quote, callings?
Well, I wonder, you call it a calling. I think of it as a human obligation.
Right.
Like I said, you grow up with Ubuntu saying, I am because we are.
Right.
And if you think of, everyone around you as part of you,
right,
whatever you think it's good for you should be good for them.
Right.
So the way I've always thought of mentorship is taking your time to open doors for someone.
Right.
Why? Because you are where you are because doors were opened for you by somebody.
Right.
So to me, it's really part of what I call good living.
Right.
Or really being part of a human society or human community.
Right.
And all of us doing the little we can to actually contribute in making a human race a better race.
Oh, superb. I conceptualize it one way, and because I'm on the receiving end, so I've had so many wonderful people, provide time and energy to help me. But the thing I reflect back on now is that, and I'm curious what you think of this statement, that a mentor is somebody who sees a greater vision for you than you see for yourself. And they know that in you, you have it. Sometimes you just have to believe it, and they help you, they coach you through that process of having greater confidence, greater belief, and as you critically said, opening the right doors and having you, see the potential that's within you.
Absolutely true.
Right.
It is an absolute, true description of really what a mentor is. But funny enough, I find the greatest mentors don't even think of themselves as the greatest mentors.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
of
course, yeah.
Like I say,
they just do, as you
they
said.
just do it because they feel, this is the right thing to do. It's effortless for them. And this is what a unique characteristic that seems to be universal across all of them.
Well, let me ask you this. So I had a crossroads moment, and I'm curious what your take on this would be. So early on in my career, I would have the privilege, and it really is a privilege to work with so many amazing graduate students, and at let's say at a master's level. And our program has a surgical scientist program.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we would invest time. I would invest time, my energy, and I was just so excited for these individuals. They're going to come into the program, they're going to graduate, and then they're going to become surgeon scientists. And at the end of those meetings after they had graduated, I'd say, this is great. Now we're going to get you doing all this research. And they would come to me and say, I don't know if research is where I want to spend the rest of my life. And at that point, I would have this reaction of, I failed them. I've failed. This is horrible. How can you not want to do research? And obviously with time, I've become clearly have a much broader perspective in that ultimately, it is still a privilege to have someone work with you, and more importantly, it would be a bigger problem if those individuals went into something they weren't passionate about.
True.
And ultimately, as you think about how to help people, you say, okay, now I say, understand.
Yeah.
How can I help you? Yeah. I didn't do that before, and I wonder when in your own life how your style of helping students has changed. Anywhere from some of the tough love examples where sometimes they don't want to hear what you have to say, but they need to hear it.
That's true.
To all the other things in between.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, we all have different ways of approaching things. And for the most part, there's no right or wrong way of doing things. Everything depends on the individual, their goals, and so on. I mean, I'll give you a sense of my approach to what I describe as support for people who put their trust in me.
Right.
So, for instance, people come in, and I often try to make it clear right from the beginning that this is not about me. My job is to help them and facilitate them to achieve their goals. So we would often actually say, hey, where do you think of yourself beyond the 4 years of your PhD, as an example?
Right.
Where would you like to be? My goal is simple: to help shape your educational journey in a way that makes you the best candidate for whatever you want to do when you're done school.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whether it's research, whether you want to be an educator, or you want to work in some other areas, including those who really want to go to industry. And I say, I will do whatever I can to be able to facilitate you to have that industry experience as part of your educational journey. I say, hey, I may not have all the answers, but I know colleagues who would.
Right.
And part of my role is to see whether I can help you knock on other doars to make it that easier.
Right.
And I often try to remind my trainees and students, say, if at any time during our discussion I appear as though I'm directing you or telling you what you should be doing, always tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, you promised not to do that. So because really this is all about how I can help you to be able to achieve your own goals.
Right.
And it's not necessarily true that people go into a research education to learn to become a researcher because they want to work in research.
Right.
They could very well use those skills for other things in their lives.
Yeah.
And I try to make it very clear that this is definitely not about me. And if my behaviors and my actions ever reflected that I have lost track of that goal, they should remind me.
That's actually a very, very, it's a good perspective to have. I think many of us forget that from time to time, and we get caught up in the ego part of it. And I think true mentorship is almost devoid of ego, because you're trying to ultimately put everything on them and not so worried about yourself. I look at the differentiation between success and significance. Success often is fairly about you. Significance, I think, has more to do with we, which is how can we, as an institution, as a country, as a people, advance. And I think that you've certainly elevated to that general type of approach.
Would be, and I mean, I tell all my trainees three things,
right?
And I go around saying about the same things.
Right.
I say the first thing is, one of the things I learned throughout my career is if you're going to be working in research, number one thing is think collaborations. And you cannot be successful at collaboration unless you're collegial. So collaborations come hand in hand with being collegial to other people. The second thing I say to them, I say, hey, this is the thing I learned from one of the best mentors in the world, is Dave Sackett, is you can always behave yourself to a successful outcome. Right?
Yeah.
And then lastly, I say to them, I say, always, in whatever you do, think Ubuntu. In other words, think I am because we are.
Right.
And that helps you to be able to make sure that whatever you think is best for you, it should be best for the people around you, the people in your collaborations. And really, when you think about this, if you want your colleagues to have certain behaviors and certain things that you think will be good for you, if you think Ubuntu, you're going to model those behaviors yourself.
That's absolutely.
And I see this as really the tenets of really what makes people to succeed. And I say, I'm not saying this because I know for sure they work.
Right.
But I often say to them, I say, I have some empirical evidence, at least from the people I've worked with,
right,
including some of my students who became some of my best mentors,
right,
that these principles really do work.
Thanks for watching OrthoPod. Stay tuned for more episodes.